My stepmother attempted to disrupt my wedding by claiming that my fiancé was unfaithful to me with another woman. However, her actions backfired a week ago. Kyle and I tied the knot surrounded by the people we hold dear. The wedding proceeded as we had planned, with the presence of our loved ones transforming our day into a joyous celebration. Our close family and friends had gathered to witness our union, creating an atmosphere of warmth and happiness. Our friends had gathered to bear witness to our union, creating an atmosphere of warmth and happiness. It was a day filled with shared laughter, joyous embraces, and the simple pleasures of togetherness. Everything had gone perfectly except for one unfortunate incident. My stepmother, in an act of unwarranted interference, attempted to disrupt the ceremony. My parents had divorced when I was a child, but they have been exemplary parents since then. Since that time, my mother has been in a relationship with a man named Holt, and my father has been married to Gigi. Despite the fact that I was quite young when my father remarried, I never felt any discomfort about it. In fact, I was quite pleased that our family was expanding. Gigi has a daughter from her previous marriage, Naomi, who is just a year older than me. When my father introduced me to her, I thought we could become good friends. However, it soon became apparent that Naomi was only sweet when my father was around. Naomi frequently teased me about my appearance, which I found particularly challenging to endure. Our arguments, which often involved physical altercations, were intense and resembled those of typical adolescents. Gigi, my sister, would often intervene when Naomi and I were engaged in heated discussions. Naomi was adept at separating us through the use of tears, which she would often feign as evidence of my physical aggression towards her. Despite my efforts to clarify the situation and demonstrate that Naomi was the instigator, Gigi remained unconvinced. She would then wait for my father's return home to express her frustrations. My father, thankfully, never took sides in the conflict between me and Naomi. As the years passed, our relationship continued to deteriorate. My mother began to observe how Gigi and Naomi treated me when my father was not present. She discussed this with him, and since then, my father has taken me on weekend outings, just the two of us. These outings have created a space where we can spend quality time together. I have come to appreciate these moments, cherishing the undivided attention and the chance to share all my thoughts and concerns with him. Upon discovering this, Gigi was understandably displeased. She strongly urged her father to include Naomi in these outings, but he remained unwavering in his decision and ultimately refused before marrying Kyle. We spent 6 remarkable years dating during that period. I introduced him to my parents on numerous occasions during family dinners. On one occasion, we shared stories and enjoyed the meal in a cheerful atmosphere. Gigi suddenly ceased eating and looked at us intently. I looked at her curiously, and she then made a bold remark about Kyle being too good. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, prompting my mother to inquire angrily about her remark. Gigi attempted to brush it off as a compliment to Kyle, however Kyle was just as upset and stood up for me, expressing that she should not talk about us this way. He continued to tell her how fortunate he felt. His words brought a smile to my face, and I felt grateful for his support. The dinner continued after that, though 12's failed attempt at humor lingered like an uninvited guest returning home. Her words continued to sting, lingering in my mind. It was undeniable that Kyle, standing at 6 feet 2 inches with Kyle's physique was the result of regular workouts and met conventional standards of attractiveness. In contrast, I stood at 5 feet 5 inches and carried a bit of weight. Surprisingly, Kyle had never made me feel insecure about my body. Our love life was healthy, and he never uttered a word about my weight. Despite this, my self-esteem was negatively affected. My self-esteem was occasionally undermined, particularly when I observed other women admiring him. 12's comment that night resonated with me deeply, yet the knowledge that Kyle had immediately defended our relationship reassured me over the years. Over time, Gigi continued to make subtle yet hurtful comments about my appearance whenever we were alone. During my dinners with my father at his residence, whether it was a remark on my choice of clothing or a casual observation about my need to exercise more frequently, her words eroded my confidence. These comments, which were often disguised as concern or casual observations, created a persistent undercurrent of self-doubt. Kyle was prone to doubt me whenever he overheard her remarks. He consistently defended me, although Gigi and Naomi were not particularly friendly towards me. Naomi often acted inappropriately towards Kyle, getting uncomfortably close and making him uneasy despite his repeated expressions of discomfort. Despite Kyle's attempts to dissuade her, Naomi continued to behave inappropriately with him whenever she had the opportunity. During a Thanksgiving celebration with family and friends, a truth and dare game was played. Naomi was dared to sit on the person she liked the most. It was assumed that she would sit on her mother's lap, but she boldly walked up to my fiancé, pointing at him to indicate that she intended to sit on him. Kyle promptly stood up, refusing her request. I observed the interaction. Naomi's face turned red with embarrassment as she was aware that everyone was watching her rejection. I was unable to restrain my laughter, realizing that Kyle would never reciprocate her interest, regardless of how desperately she wanted it, throughout the remainder of the Thanksgiving gathering. Naomi appeared visibly embarrassed by the ordeal, and the atmosphere became the situation was somewhat awkward, but Kyle and I chose to disregard it and continue enjoying the celebration with our friends and family. As our wedding day drew nearer, I experienced a growing sense of excitement and joy. Kyle and I were deeply in love and eagerly anticipating the journey ahead, despite my initial reservations. I extended an invitation to Gigi and Naomi. At my father's insistence, he guaranteed that if any disturbances occurred, he would promptly remove them from the premises. I acquiesced to my father's request, hoping for the best on our special day. On the day we were scheduled to exchange our vows, the atmosphere was palpably charged with anticipation, surrounded by the love of friends and family. I was in the midst of getting I was prepared. My dress was adorned, and my hair was gracefully braided. My bridesmaids were ready to accompany me down the aisle. However, just as everything seemed to be going well, Gigi barged into my dressing room and demanded to speak with me privately. My mother informed her that I needed time to prepare before it was time to walk down the aisle. Despite my efforts to maintain composure, G persisted, emphasizing that she needed to share something crucial before what she perceived as a significant misstep. Exhausted by her persistence, I requested that everyone allow us some privacy. My mother regarded me with a raised eyebrow, and I assured her that I would address the situation with Gigi promptly so that I resumed my preparations, and my mother nodded in understanding before departing, leaving Gigi and me alone. I turned to Gigi and informed her that she had 2 minutes to explain herself before I would ask her to leave the room. Gigi, with an air of concern, produced multiple pictures and placed them on the table. She claimed that these pictures with the images would change everything I knew about Kyle. I was shocked. I glanced at the photos, only to see Tom innocently chatting with a distant cousin at a restaurant. Gigi told me that she had found Kyle talking to this mysterious woman while she was out for dinner last week and had snapped these pictures so that I wouldn't be surprised later to find out about his alleged infidelity. She presented the information in a manner that suggested a false concern about infidelity. She urged me to reconsider the wedding, suggesting that I was about to make a significant error. I took a moment to collect my thoughts and decided to engage with her, determined not to let her influence my wedding day. I opened the door and requested my mother to bring Kyle and my father to my room. Gigi, under the impression that I was about to confront Kyle regarding his alleged affair, reassured me that everything would be fine once I confronted him. She was unaware that a different kind of confrontation awaited her. Kyle was initially hesitant to enter my room, as he did not want to see me in my wedding dress. However, at this point, I did not care. Gigi had apparently lost interest in the traditions surrounding the situation and urged him to come inside. As Kyle stepped into the room, Gigi wore a triumphant smirk, anticipating a confrontation. I gestured toward the picture she had spread across the table and calmly asked Kyle if he could explain the images. He looked at the photos, a puzzled expression on his face. I could see Gigi reveling in the drama she had orchestrated. Gigi had orchestrated Kyle maintaining his composure. She explained that the woman in the pictures was his cousin whom he had met for dinner last week. She clarified the context of each image, pointing out the family resemblance and the innocent nature of their conversation. As Kyle's explanation dismantled her scheme, Gigi's confident demeanor began to waver. My father, who had joined us at that point, listened intently. I could sense the frustration building in Gigi as her plan unraveled in a moment of triumph. I turned to Gigi and revealed that the woman in the photos was indeed Kyle's distant cousin, whom I had in fact met at one of his family events. I couldn't help but smirk as her face faltered, realizing that her attempt to ruin my wedding had failed. Her attempt to disrupt my wedding had been unsuccessful. My father, who had been listening to us in silence, had discerned the truth. He looked at me and inquired if Gigi was the individual who had presented the photographs to me. I nodded and proceeded to explain how she had attempted to claim that the man I was about to marry was having an affair. My father's facial expression indicated that he was extremely displeased. One might inquire as to why Gigi would even consider engaging in such a deceitful act. Gigi appeared to be disconcerted and ashamed. My father, in a stern tone, demanded an explanation. This is when she revealed her true intentions. Gigi asserted that I did not deserve to marry someone like Kyle and that our relationship would never succeed. Gigi asserted that her daughter Naomi had fallen in love with Kyle over the years. We stared at her in disbelief as she went on to insist that Naomi, being more beautiful than me, deserved to marry Kyle instead. She went on to explain that over the years she had attempted to plant negative thoughts in our minds. Despite her best efforts, she had been unable to influence our relationship in any meaningful way. However, when she observed Kyle with a mysterious woman, she saw an opportunity to finally break us up. At this point, we all stared at her as if she had completely lost her mind. My mother, already upset with her behavior, told my father that this was unacceptable. My father then informed her that she was to leave immediately. My father immediately concurred and demanded that Gigi leave the premises immediately. She attempted to protest, but my mother forcibly removed her from the room. Naomi entered the room in a state of agitation, demanding answers as she sensed that something was amiss. My father then proceeded to elucidate the deceptive actions of Gigi. Upon hearing this, Naomi redirected her attention to me. Without a moment's pause, she began yelling at me, launching into a barrage of accusations, blaming me for tearing her family apart. I remained calm, attempting to explain the gravity of 12's deceit. However, Naomi's anger only intensified, and she sneered, stating that my relationship with Kyle was a sham built on lies. Her mother was correct in attempting to terminate the relationship, while I attempted to justify our love. She dismissed my claims, stating that I was deluding myself. She reiterated that she deserved to be with Kyle and that he was only with me because he believed I was wealthier than her, given that I had a more prestigious job at that point. Kyle, unable to contain his anger, intervened. His anger had reached its limit, and he intervened, confronting her in a stern manner. He set the record straight, expressing disappointment and firmness as he rebuffed Naomi's advances in no uncertain terms. He conveyed that he would never be interested in her and that he had made it very clear to her publicly on several occasions. On numerous occasions, he highlighted that we were engaged and that Naomi and Gigi had no right to disrupt our wedding day. Naomi, confronted with opposition, paused for a moment, realizing that her attempts to sow discord were ineffective. Throughout this confrontation, my father attempted to act as a mediator, attempting to bring reason into the discussion. The tumultuous interchange, despite Naomi's relentless accusations, he stood by my side and, eventually, he discerned that Naomi was not going to relent. He requested that she depart the wedding with Gigi. Naomi appeared taken aback by this unexpected turn, and a sense of satisfaction spread across my face. I turned to Kyle, displaying a combination of frustration and amusement. We shared a knowing glance, and he burst into laughter, regarding the innocent images that G had twisted into something so devious. We were grateful that our relationship had weathered this bizarre storm. The wedding continued unaffected by 12's actions. The ill-conceived interference was ultimately unsuccessful, as our vows were exchanged and the celebration with our loved ones resumed. The day was filled with joy and laughter, just as we had dreamed about. As the festivities continued, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. 12's plan had backfired, and her attempt to cast out my relationship with Kyle has only served to strengthen the bond between us. Upon returning home, we enjoyed a wonderful honeymoon. I have been informed by my father that relations between Gigi and him are not amicable. She believes that we were too harsh in our treatment of her and that we wrongly expelled her from our home. My mother and I have also been informed of this. My father has also sent me several messages in which he claims that I am unwell for embarrassing his mother and continues to warn me that I would never be happy with Kyle. This is starting to affect me, so I would like to know why for exposing my stepmother's allegations and then kicking her out of my wedding. It has been several days since my last update. One of my bridesmaids, my cousin Fiona, had overheard the entire conversation between Gigi and Naomi on the day in question. Disturbed by what she had heard during the confrontation with Gigi and Naomi, she felt compelled to share the information with a few close family members. The news was shared with a few close family members as it slowly spread. The collective disapproval grew, creating a ripple effect that reached the ears of other relatives. The story of their disruptive actions during my wedding became a topic of conversation within the family, triggering a cascade of disapproval. All of our relatives were as shocked as we were when we first learned of their deceitful scheme. There is a consensus within the family that what Gigi and Naomi did to me was wrong. The dissemination of information and shared indignation led to the family collectively shunning them. Gigi and Naomi, I have received several concerned phone calls and messages from relatives who were previously unaware of the disruptive events that unfolded during my wedding today. I invited my father over for dinner as I hadn't seen him since the wedding. Upon his arrival, I observed that he looked visibly different. My father opened up about how Gigi and Naomi were making his life increasingly difficult during our meal. They were insistent that I owe them an apology for kicking them out. Kyle and I were shocked listening to how entitled they felt to get an apology for me when they had tried to ruin my wedding. The initial response was one of disbelief, attempting to comprehend the extent of their audacity. My father, sensing my frustration, expressed his own disappointment in their behavior. He assured me that I owed no apology for protecting my wedding against their disruptive actions. It was concerning to observe my father dealing with the toxicity of the situation. I then conveyed my concerns to him, and we concurred that the persistent disagreements with Gigi were adversely affecting his mental well-being. Additionally, he disclosed that Naomi had threatened legal action, citing emotional distress resulting from the wedding incident. The situation initially appeared implausible, yet I was compelled to acknowledge its potential implications. Despite my initial inclination to dismiss their actions as trivial, I came to recognize the significant impact their demands were having on our family dynamics. I intend to address this matter with Naomi and Gigi in order to achieve a resolution. Update 2. Today, I met with Naomi and Gigi as previously discussed. I extended an invitation to them both for lunch at a local cafe. I suggested that we meet at a cafe instead of my place. KY wanted to go with me, but I insisted that this was something I needed to do on my own. As we sat down, the atmosphere was palpably tense. I calmly expressed my concerns about their actions during the wedding, emphasizing the hurt they had caused. However, Gigi remained defensive, insisting that she had acted in Gigi's best interest. Given the information she had previously conveyed, she maintained that she was acting in Naomi's best interest. This assertion elicited a strong negative reaction from me, prompting a retort that Kyle was my husband and that I would not tolerate their continued disregard for our relationship. I also highlighted that, at the very least, she could have apologized to me for her actions. The interruption of my wedding day led to a heated exchange of words. Gigi, with a stubborn demeanor, refused to admit any wrongdoing, claiming that she was only looking out for her daughter. Naomi, on the other hand, began to accuse me of being insecure, suggesting that my reaction was fueled by my jealousy of her response prompted me to laugh in her face. I was compelled to clarify that I had never viewed her as a competitor. I proceeded to enumerate my academic achievements, including securing a scholarship, graduating from my dream college, and landing a job that provided financial comfort. I expressed my frustration, emphasizing that I had a partner who genuinely loved me and that I did not need to go behind someone's back to try and steal them. Naomi's face twisted with anger as she retorted, spewing hurtful words in my direction. She claimed that I was living in a fantasy if I thought Kyle truly loved me. She insinuated that he was only with me for my money. In contrast, I had a partner who genuinely loved me and I did not need to engage in clandestine activities to attempt to win their affections. Naomi's face contorted with anger as she retorted, spewing hurtful words in my direction. She claimed that I was living in a fantasy if I believed that Kyle truly loved me. She insinuated that he was only with me out of pity or convenience, and that he deserved someone better. Her words were venomous, and I tried to maintain composure, refusing to let her undermine my relationship or tarnish my happiness. Gigi, standing beside Naomi, couldn't resist adding her own bitter remarks with a condescending tone. She questioned my ability to handle a marriage. She then proceeded to imply that I was naive and inexperienced, stating that I was unaware of Kyle's true intentions. She went on to say that it was laughable that I could keep a man like Kyle satisfied, given the circumstances. I took a moment to collect myself and suppress the anger that was bubbling within. I then responded that her opinions about my marriage were irrelevant. Kyle and I shared a deep connection that went beyond her shallow judgment. Therefore, if she could not respect that, it was best for us to part ways. Naomi was fueled by a mix of anger and frustration. Furthermore, she accused me of being selfish, claiming that I had ruined her chance at happiness by Mary and Kyle. As the argument intensified, Gigi played the victim card, asserting that my decision to kick them out was an overreaction despite my attempts to reason with them. It became evident that reasoning with them was futile. The refusal of the two individuals to acknowledge their mistakes and the depth of their actions only served to intensify the argument. It became evident that maintaining a relationship with individuals who were so hellbent on causing harm was untenable. The meeting ended on a sour note with unresolved issues. The meeting concluded with a sense of lingering tension, leaving me with the realization that some conflicts are irreparable. Upon returning home, I experienced a profound emotional burden, as the weight of the confrontation pressed heavily on my shoulders. I broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the emotional toll of the encounter. The emotional and physical exhaustion I felt was not just about Gigi and Naomi's disdain for me, it was also about the understanding that my father was likely enduring a similar, if not more intense, experience. I have since spoken with my mother and made the difficult decision to permanently sever ties with Gigi and Naomi. My mother was initially shocked by the extent of the hurt they had caused me and expressed a desire to confront them. I intervened, emphasizing that their actions were not worth our time or emotional energy. The toxicity they brought into our lives was not worth the emotional toll it took. I am choosing to prioritize my mental well-being and stability over their negativity. I have chosen to prioritize the stability of my marriage over the relentless negativity of my former in-laws. This decision has been painful, but it is a necessary step toward a healthier and happier life. I would like to thank everyone who commented on my previous post. It has been 2 months since I last updated you, and much has changed in our lives. Firstly, my father and Gigi are now separated. As many had predicted, Gi's refusal to acknowledge her mistakes, coupled with constant pressure and conflicts, took a toll on my father. Consequently, he moved out of their place and is consulting with lawyers to initiate divorce proceedings. After my father blocked her on all fronts, Gigi attempted to reach out to me, but I also blocked her. This prompted her to call Kyle, who did not pick up her calls knowingly. She then sent a lengthy message to him about how her daughter Naomi was heartbroken. Gigi blamed me for orchestrating their separation and accused me of turning my father against her. Kyle and I read the message together, shaking our heads at her attempt to shift blame. We chose not to respond to her, and Kyle also blocked her, as well as my father. Since his separation, my father appears to have become more lighthearted and happier. He is gradually finding peace away from the constant turmoil with Gigi and Naomi. Kyle and I have been there to support him through this challenging time. We have encouraged him to focus on his well-being. Despite the difficulties, it is heartening to see my father rediscovering himself and embracing the freedom from toxic dynamics. A month ago, I accompanied my mother on a vacation to spend time with her, as she had been worried about me and fuming at how they had treated me. The beach vacation was a much-needed respite, as we strolled along the serene beaches, reminiscing about our joyful memories and discussing plans for the future in the quiet moments of our vacation, surrounded by the comforting presence of my mother. I felt a profound sense of peace, which served as a therapeutic reset, allowing us to strengthen our bond and cherish the moments of peace away from the chaos that Gigi and Naomi had brought into our lives. Our bond and the moments of peace away from the chaos that Gigi and Naomi had brought into our lives are now being cherished. As I am writing this, I find myself overwhelmed with gratitude for the love that Kyle and I share. His unwavering support and understanding have been the pillars that have held me up through the storms if I didn't have them. I am immensely grateful for the support and loyalty that Kyle has provided throughout our relationship. Without his unwavering support and understanding, I am unsure of how I would have managed the challenges that we have faced. I am particularly thankful for the joy he brings, the laughter we share, and the strength he provides in the face of challenges. Looking ahead, I am excited to embrace the prospect of spending the rest of my life with Kyle.